What happens when your worst fear becomes your reality? Hi, I'm Brent Cassity. Welcome to the Nightmare Success In and Out podcast, where we explore how to overcome your fears and nightmares and set yourself free. We're going to be exploring this topic with guys I was in Leavenworth with and others who survived their own nightmare. These stories can be inspiring, sometimes sad. There's some humor, but hopefully you can come away with a nugget of something that'll help you knock down some of the prisons you built up in your own mind. All right, welcome back, Nightmare Success In and Out listeners. This is where you come for what happens when your worst fear becomes your reality. How do you adapt, survive, overcome, set yourself free? Well, and don't forget to follow, subscribe, share this thing out. Share this thing out. If you like it, share it. Helps the show. Okay, folks, I got to tell you, I have a wild, wacky, unbelievable story here with my good buddy, Jeremy Harrell, who I've been talking to for a while now, and I've been very excited to interview him. We're doing this, we're recording this the day after Veterans Day, which is very appropriate because Jeremy is a veteran and has quite a story. And I want to just give you a little rundown on Jeremy Harrell. And when I say he has a wild, wacky story, when you guys hear this story, we're going to release this after December 8th because Jeremy's got a situation where he took his case to trial. He gets sentenced, I think, on December 8th, and then we're going to release it after that. But this is a guy that does great work. He has served his country. When I say he served his country, he is a U.S. Army combat veteran who served in Operation Iraqi Freedom and the global war on terrorism. Jerry served honorably for 9 years. Jeremy went on to become involved in operations management with companies such as UPS. In 2017, Jeremy founded Veterans Club, Inc., which is a premier nonprofit that assists veterans in healing from PTSD, substance abuse. It also assists in homeless veterans with housing and programs to get them back on their feet. Jeremy's organization is nationally recognized. And he's also got this thing that he did with the homeless veterans, was the tiny home community for homeless veterans. I don't know if there's any of its kind, but it's the first I had read about in Kentucky. And you might have seen Jeremy on a lot of different programs on TV. He's talking about veterans issues, social issues, PTSD, homelessness, suicide prevention, foreign policy. You see him on Fox and CNN, History Channel, all kinds, all over the place. This guy is doing good work in the midst of all the stuff that was going on with this crazy thing. And when I say this is a crazy thing, I'm just going to let you know a little bit about it just right now. So Jeremy founded this nonprofit. In 2011, he was diagnosed, as many men have been who have been in the Iraqi war and other wars in Afghanistan, with PTSD. It's a mental health disorder. So Jeremy, in 2017, to help himself, help other people with PTSD, he founded an organization that did just that. It got veterans together to talk about their problems. They had a horse program that to people to be able to connect and get over some of their PTSD with the connection with the horses. Very good stuff. Families would come together. They'd meet at coffee shops. It was, if you read about this, and you can read about this online, this is really good stuff. And somebody comes along and says, no, if he can do all that, then he's not disabled. Jeremy's not disabled. Now, he could go have a job, but he can't volunteer and do 60, 80 hours a week. He's taking money that he shouldn't be taking. And we're talking about $100,000 over 13 years. And he could have earned a lot more money doing it some other way. This is a crazy story. And this guy, who is a guy that should be thanked for his service as a veteran, who should be thanked for doing the service that he's doing for veterans, is being persecuted by our own government. I find it absolutely flabbergasting. I can't wait to jump into all this for you guys to get to know Jeremy, because he's a super guy. And I hate that he's having to go through all this. Before we do, I want to recognize Auto Plaza Direct. I don't think anybody likes spending a couple of weekends walking car lots looking for a car. Then you spend 4 or 5 hours in the dealership to buy a car. It's kind of like a root canal appointment. Well, there's a better way to take away all that pain and hassle getting a car. It's called Auto Plaza Direct. They're your personal car concierge. Just tell them the car you want, what you can pay, and they'll go find that car for you. They'll negotiate your best price. They take all the hassle out of it. They also offer you warranties and financing. It's all full service. Go to autoplazadirect.com to get started with your personal car concierge, the new hassle-free way, the car buying experience you deserve. Auto Plaza Direct. Tell them Brent from Nightmare Success sent you. Jeremy Harrell, welcome in, my man. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to hopping in this conversation with you.
I have too, Jeremy. You and I have had multiple conversations. I think the world of you. I think this is one of those stories that makes you just do backflips to understand why in the world our government would be spending money on somebody who's out there helping the community, who is a war veteran, who has suffered through PTSD, who is helping himself and the community get out of PTSD. And then you've got somebody that comes against you. And it's like, one of those Shih Tzus on your Achilles that just won't let go. How are you? How have you been getting through all this?
Well, I believe in full transparency, and I've had to be resilient through this. This has really tested my faith. It's tested my faith in this country. It's made me question the reason for serving this country, and I'll tell you, one of the most hurtful things I've ever read to date was when I saw a paper that said the United States of America versus Jeremy Harrell. And the reason why that's so sentimental and symbolic to me is because I spent most of my adult life doing, protecting this country, right? Serving this country. And so I just couldn't believe that now they assume that I'm an enemy of the country, essentially. And so, it's been hard to deal with, but I've had a lot of good people around me. I've been able to learn a lot through this process, and I just realized that we just have to move forward, right? You have to, you fight the best you can, and that's why I went to trial. I wanted to fight this. I know the statistics behind going to trial, but I thought if any case could beat those, could be part of the 2%, it would be this one. But unfortunately, it didn't work out that way. But we'll definitely deep dive into that.
And I want to say you don't have to go very far to see the amount of support that Jeremy has in the community. This is not like somebody brought something up and everybody came out of the woodworks and said, no, he's not a good guy. This is somebody that has a bunch of warriors behind him saying, he's helped me. He's changed my life. It's been the impact that got me out of my house and into the community. And it's story after story. And this is why I have been so interested in and excited to interview you, because your story needs to be out there. I want us to go back a little bit. Take us back, Jeremy, because before you were ever doing all this with the Veterans Club, where were you growing up? What was your life like for you as a kid? Where were you?
Yeah, well, so, what happened to me as a child is kind of the reason I am the man I am today. But I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky, right? Louisville, most people say. We say Louisville here.
Louisville.
Yeah, Louisville. But I grew up in a pretty bad environment. Has some domestic violence, some alcoholism, drug use, poverty, all the perfect formula to set you up for failure, right? And for some reason, though, as I was growing up, going through all that, there was something inside of me that made me realize that this isn't how it's really supposed to look, right? That life really isn't supposed to be this way. And I think I learned a lot of that from my classmates in school and just people I would spend the night with. I would go to their house and go, wow, this is like the Taj Mahal here, right? Like you're getting snacks, nobody's hitting each other, and nobody's drunk, right? Yeah. But I always had this desire to use that and turn it around into something positive. And so it made me more of a compassionate and empathetic individual. And just to kind of
Did you have siblings, Jeremy, growing up?
No.
It was you. It was you as a kid on your own handling all this craziness around you. Wow.
Yeah.
Because I've often thought, Jeremy, that because I've interviewed a lot of people that have been in that type of situation, but it seems like when they have siblings, they can kind of pull together and say, I can't believe mom and dad. I can't believe this or that. And when it's an only kid, it's like you really are on an island.
Yeah. I mean, it makes you really have to dig deep and try to figure out how to problem solve on your own. And so what that did, it's kind of a catch-22. It was positive in a lot of ways, but negative in others. Is it made me grow up fast. And you know, I don't remember a lot of childhood memories. I remember trying to survive. But on the flip side, of course, down the road, it's helped in a bunch of different ways. But yeah, you know, growing up there, then, you know, I wanted to leave that environment. And the only way I knew I could, because I knew I couldn't afford college, my grades weren't as good as they should have been because I was focusing on everything else. And so I decided to join the military, and I thought, well, you know, there's a bunch of benefits to that. Number one, I get to go do something bigger than myself. I've always been an advocate for the underdog because I've been the underdog for so long, and I thought I could do that, and then I can't leave if I want to, right? So there's no threat of me coming back into this environment, and so that's what I decided to do. But just to kind of let the audience know, a couple weeks before I shipped off to boot camp, I was delivering groceries to senior living apartments when it snowed. That's kind of what my childhood created in me, is that desire to want to serve others, the desire to want to help those who can't quite help themselves in a lot of ways. So I am thankful for that. But that went on to the Army and loved it. I remember getting there, and there were so many people who were like, "This is miserable." And I'm going, "What do you mean? It's just 3 meals a day. I got a bed to sleep in, and I can shower when I need to. Like, this is, I mean, I've been yelled at all my life. I can handle that, right?" So it was a different experience.
Almost like a great escape for you.
It absolutely was. And the structure, which is usually what's hard to adapt to, is something that I had been craving since a young boy because I had no structure. And so I really liked to know what I needed to do at 4 o'clock every day, and then at 9 o'clock, and then to get up at 4 o'clock, right? So I really enjoyed it. I really thrived there. I promoted fast. And of course, you know, when 9/11 happened, you know, things started to heat up. The op tempo in the military started to increase, and wasn't long after that, in 2003, I went over for the initial invasion of Iraq, and spent 15 months in Iraq.
I want to talk about that,
Sure.
Jeremy, because I haven't had the opportunity to have anybody on that did that.
Sure.
What goes through a guy's mind knowing, I mean, you knew that you were in the Army, you knew that something could come up. I'm sure when you saw 9/11, you knew something was going to happen.
Yeah.
What goes through your mind though, when you go into, you know, Iraq was, you know, we all saw it on TV. It was from what we saw from Saddam Hussein. It was horrible and dangerous and didn't look like that they had any mercy. What does a combat guy think as he's literally going into another country to create battle?
I love that question, and nobody's ever asked me the question like that, and it's so hard to answer because there's a little bit of excitement, right? As crazy as that may seem, because you train and you train and you train. This is kind of like the Super Bowl, right? You go and see if all that training has paid off, but then you quickly understand what that looks like, what the ramifications of that is, and that the good guys, they don't always win, right? And you got to realize that you're probably going to lose people. And it could be people that you've spent the last 4 or 5 years with, serving with, living with, doing life with. And one thing that you establish really quickly is that when you're training, you're shooting at targets, and these targets do not shoot back, right? And it's a whole different ball game when that script flips. And but I just remember kind of being excited and very, very nervous and scared at the same time. And one interesting thing, the way my childhood ties into this experience is, when traumatic things happened in Iraq, those were some of the same feelings inside of me that happened when I would see, you know, my father abuse my mother. And I connected the two, and I thought that's when I really learned that trauma is often the same, just the details are different, right? So when people experience trauma, even if it isn't military trauma, there's all kinds of other trauma, and there's some similar feelings there. And I thought, why am I thinking about that at a time like this? But it just goes to show you how that works, and it was just a surreal experience, and it really took more than I wish it would have for me to adjust to that, and it really had to get to a place where I had to really like look in the mirror and accept that I'm probably going to die here. And then when I accepted,
that is a deep thought.
Oh man, like when I said that and I accepted it, I wasn't as scared anymore. Right? It's almost like I thought, well, what a way to go. right? If I'm going to have to die, what better way than for my country, right? And I thought, what an honorable way. And so I just got it over with and thought, okay. And I just didn't expect to leave Iraq. And so when that happened, I started focusing more on what we had to do, and I was less fearful and more motivated to kind of do what we needed to do there.
Wow, that's really interesting, Jeremy. Because I mean, in effect, you basically killed yourself off in your mind, and
Yeah.
then you felt like you didn't have anything to lose and went into battle. That's wow. That's deep stuff.
Which is why, when you see USA versus me, I go, do you know what I had to do? You know what I had to do I was 21 years old when I decided, hey, I'm going to die. And so essentially you kind of do die to yourself. I'll never be that same guy that I was before I went there. And so, that's just very, very difficult thing to deal with.
Did you have like a girlfriend or anything like that you left, or did you go straight into the thing and you were on your own?
No. Oh, well, so when I went into the military, I had a girlfriend and we were together throughout my training. But when I deployed to Iraq, I had a daughter, and she was just not even 2 years old yet. And that was another form of pressure, right? Is who's going to take care of my daughter, right? And then the fact that you're going to miss so much at the beginning of their lives. You're missing certain words, you're missing certain things that they learn, and of course that was very difficult. And then it's very hard on like a relationship with someone, whether you're married or you're engaged to someone. Like, it's very hard on the relationship because they don't know what to expect either. They don't know whether they're going to get the phone call tomorrow that you didn't make it.
Yeah.
And so unfortunately in that time period, the relationship went south because we were just there so long. When we initially left, up until that point, deployments were about 6, maybe 9 months long at the most. And so when we got there in March, I thought, okay, June, I'll be home, right? And then around June, comes and they're like, no, we're gonna have to extend. Well, that continued to happen all the way till March of the next year, or I'm sorry, April of the next year, right? And so there was a lot of frustration there because here I have this daughter that needs her dad. And then I'm also having a relationship that's failing, and I don't know exactly how that's working out. And I'm trying to focus on what I have to do in Iraq so that I don't get killed, right? Yeah. And so it was just a very difficult time in my life.
Did you see that a lot, Jeremy, with guys that had relationships and it just timed out a lot of times?
Yeah. I mean, I've seen that. Unfortunately, I've seen men get mailed divorce papers. It's a sad thing, and that was a lot of, formed a lot of resentment because I'm thinking, how selfish somebody could be when they're, in the safety of the United States, and you're gonna leave or break up with or divorce your loved one who's over here trying to make sure that you continue to have that form of safety and security. It's not, it's not a negative thing that you're deployed. I mean, it should be something that you should be proud of as a spouse, So I didn't understand. And of course, I was a young man. I'm going, why wouldn't they be proud of this? Yeah. But then, just people are like, I'm lonely. I feel like I don't have any help. I feel like I've developed a new routine. I feel like I can do this on my own, and all that kind of stuff. So it was really a surreal experience. Yeah.
So what was it like for you when you did that and you came back into society after being in that type of situation?
Man, I don't know that I've 100% even transitioned to this day, right? Like, it was much harder than one could imagine. I mean, I would have like these kind of fantasies about, I can't wait to get home, get back in the swing of things. I'm going to put all this behind me. We're going to go on like nothing ever happened. And man, that is just not the case. And then you start, you're in hell there. And so you're starting to form your opinion on how you think life will be when you get back. And it's going to be nice and it's going to be, good. And it doesn't always end up
romanticize what that'll be, the reentry.
Right.
Yeah.
Like this beautiful homecoming and it's, this hero's welcome and all the kind of things that you might think would happen. And it just doesn't work out that way. And in fact, I did have a lot of that. I did have people who were at the airport waiting for me. I was a grand marshal in the 4th of July parade that year, all kinds of public speaking. And, I felt like a ghost in those moments. I remember like riding through the parade, and I'm sitting on the, I don't know, maybe it was a Corvette. You know how they have the nice convertible car. I'm sitting on this car, and everybody's clapping, and I'm just going. I have a little bit of pain in my heart, going, the juice wasn't worth the squeeze. Like, yeah, you guys, yeah, it's great. Yeah, Jeremy, way to go. Yeah, but I have to go to sleep tonight, and I have to relive some of the things that I've experienced over that long period of time that I'll never be able to get out of my memory. Right. And so after the parade stops, right, and after everybody takes their flags down and undoes their yellow ribbons,
you have to go on.
It doesn't end for us, and it didn't end for me. And people would try to help. They would recognize that, man, Jeremy, there's something going on. And I would say, no, I think there's something wrong with you. Like how would you expect me to be the same man after what I went through? But at the same time, I wasn't acknowledging some of the negative parts of that. In my opinion, I thought I grew up. I thought it matured me, and it did. But it also made me almost a monster at times. I mean, I was very numb. Like I didn't have a lot of feeling for anybody or anything, because again, I had to turn the feelings off to do that kind of work, right? I had to die to myself, right? And so I never really, fixed that. And so I tried to get back to the corporate.
I think, what you're saying, Jeremy, I mean, because what I've always loved about our conversations, you're just so authentically honest about what you feel. But I think the hard thing for people that go through what you guys went through, and in horrible situations, whether it be Iraq or Afghanistan or whatever, and like you said, for long periods of time, I think what also is, because of the way that you are trained, the way that you battle, I think that it makes it difficult for someone to ask for help.
Absolutely. It took me a decade to ask for help. And the way that I got help is I had a really good job at a place here in Kentucky. It was a subcontractor of Nestle Foods, where they make all the Hot Pockets of the world, right? Every day smelled like pepperoni pizza.
That's a good smell.
Well, it's good for a certain amount of time. But no, I was working there, and I thought, I was doing good, and I had and I'd worked at like UPS and other places and didn't really have any issue. But when I got to this location, my boss just happened to be a former Marine, right? He retired out of the Marine Corps, and he just called me in one day, and he said, Jeremy, there's some stuff, man, that's going on that I need you to address. And I was like, well, what do you mean? Like we're accomplishing everything that we need to accomplish, and I'm here whenever you need me. He goes, no, it's nothing about your work ethic at all. It's about, some of your employees are saying that you're unapproachable. You're having a hard time staying awake in meetings sometimes, and it's because I couldn't sleep at night, right? And I said, I'm really trying to work on that. I mean, I'm trying to figure all that out. And he said, I really need you to go get help. He said, you have some cognitive stuff that's going on, like some functioning doesn't add up. And he's like, I just really want you to get help. And I said, okay. And I had a brand new son at that point, so I'm like, okay, no problem. I'll go figure that out, and I'll see you on Monday. And he said, it's not going to work that way. He said, I have to let you go.
Oh, man.
And so I got angry, right? I said, is this what we do to each other? Like, so you tell me everything that needs to be fixed, and then you fire me? I have a brand new son. Yeah. I live in Eastern Kentucky, which there wasn't a lot of work there. And I'm going, that's not helpful. How do you believe this is helpful? And he says, it's one of the hardest decisions I ever had to make. He said, but I know if I don't do that, you won't go. And so I left there, and I did. I went to the VA, and they put me through the ringer. I felt like a hamster in a cage. Yeah. All these series of testing, that's where they diagnosed me, with PTSD, mild traumatic brain injury, a bunch of physical stuff. Said you'll never be the same. These are the things you're going to have to deal with for the rest of your life. And I'm like, wait a minute. Yeah. Like, what do you mean? Like, I didn't come here for that. Right. I come here to check a box. Yeah. So you're telling me I'm going to leave here with all these new conditions and all these things that I have to deal with for the rest of my life? And they were like, yes. And so then that's when, I become unemployable, disabled, right at the 100% level. And and then the rest was history. But, you know, I will say for that boss, he recently donated to our organization.
Well,
It was actually it was what needed to happen. I just didn't like how it happened
yeah,
because of the loyalty, right? Like we're both brothers in arms here. We don't do that
right,
to each other.
right.
But he's right. I would have never
He
ever.
he said that it was tough love. He said, "You'll never go unless I do this."
Yeah.
So, I mean, in hearing all that, and basically saying, you know, it's a mental thing. You know, you're not in a wheelchair, but mentally you're not there. You've got work to do. You're disabled.
Yes. It's an
So
invisible wound, I call it.
an invisible wound, and you have to step through it the way that somebody has to learn how to walk again, or whatever those things are. Mentally might even be the tougher part of it because nobody can see it.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, I'd much
how did
rather have more
I'm
physical
curious,
wound.
how did you start walking through that, Jeremy? What did you start doing once they diagnose you? You know, doctor says, "Here you are. Here's what it is." How do you deal with it?
So the first thing I did, I thought, well, this is how you defeat an enemy. You learn as much about him as you can,
Okay.
right? So I started learning and trying to be a subject matter expert on PTSD and traumatic brain injury and mental health and, you know, all the axis of what it looks like to be diagnosed, what the
Hmm.
DSM says. And I'm going to therapy. I'm going to these inpatient programs. I actually went to 12 different PTSD programs around the country,
Wow.
trying my best to get on top of this to
Hmm.
where I could have a productive life and I wouldn't allow it to just totally just destroy me. And I got very, you know, I learned so much to where oftentimes mental health professionals now are like colleagues to me,
Yeah.
right? So it got to the point where I would go to therapy at the VA and we'd talk about programs that I had that helped veterans versus talking about the things that I needed to talk about, right? And so, but that's, I think, cost me with this case is that I took a proactive approach and I decided, yeah, I may have this and I may deal with this for the rest of my life and it may, you know, put limitations on what I can do, but I'm going to do my best to live a productive life despite it because I have kids. I have people, I have a wife, there's people that depend on me. I
Hmm.
can't just lay here with a pistol in my mouth with a bunch of empty pill bottles,
Right.
but it's almost as if that's what they'd rather you do.
Well, and
That's really the
that's what's so
qualifier.
Yeah, that's what's so disturbing about the stories, because what you did is you did something proactive to understand your condition, and by
Yeah,
doing that, you became so good at that that people wanted to talk to you about it.
yeah.
And I'm assuming that as you became more knowledgeable and confident in what you were talking and learning, is when you probably thought, I need to I could create an organization and not only help myself but help other people.
Yeah, because you know these mental health professionals, they would say things. I would hear them say things like, you know, the media asked Jeremy. They never come to the VA and ask us you know, how to handle veterans with PTSD and suicidal ideations.
And how
And at
did that
first,
happen, Jeremy? Because I noticed you talked a lot uh,
yeah,
to you became a media expert, on a go-to guy. How did that first start happening?
you know, I wish I had a cooler story. It just organically happened, and I think the reason why, Brent, is because you know oftentimes medical professionals, mental health professionals, they like to give numbers and they like to get up there and have this very rigid, regimental discussion about what it is scientifically. And while that is, yeah, that's good and necessary, especially at like conferences, but
Yeah.
I was more about the lived experience
You
approach.
walked it, lived it.
Yeah, so I could say, this is what it really feels like. I know the book says this, but I'm going to tell you what it really does. And I'm going to tell you what branches out off of that one symptom that the book doesn't say. And so it was more like human interest. And so they would rather ask me because I could give them lived examples. I can talk to them
Stories.
about all the hundreds of vets I've talked to that told me their story,
Yeah.
you know, and that was better for TV than 95% of veterans, you know, I mean, that's
Well, and you
good,
were
but it's
connecting also to the audience that you wanted to connect to, with the veterans and that. So
right. And then I would
that makes a lot of
offer,
sense.
yeah, and then I would offer solutions. I would offer common sense solutions, though.
Right.
Like they have to understand a person who is in a mental health crisis, it's very difficult for them to read off some pamphlet that you get and try to apply that to their life. I mainly wanted these veterans to know that we're here as an organization, whatever hour of the day or the night, doesn't matter. And we're going to stay down with you, and we're going to love you, and we're going to take care of you. And that's something that these agencies just don't put out. And
well,
I think that's
Jeremy,
what made
did you know, because your organization was a nationally known, respected,
Yep.
and is.
Yeah.
How'd you know how to do it?
Man, I never said the word nonprofit, Brent, until I started one. So when we first started Veterans Club started in 2017. So I went out to New York, and I went to an equine facilitated mentoring program out there. And I went into a chapel they had on site, and I prayed. I said, God, I don't know what it is that you have for me, but I wish that you would give me something to do in your kingdom that would bring honor and glory to you, and I could be beneficial, right? Mm-hmm. That was in October of 2017. In November of 2017, I went to Kansas, which was another, and I didn't understand why I was going to all these like equine therapy locations, but I went out there, spent the weekend out there. I flew back, and that director called. He's like, Jeremy, I'd love for you to come back out and talk to Megan Kelly about your experience here. Mm-hmm. And I said, who's that? And then she was at the Today Show then, and he explained who it was, and I said, oh, I feel embarrassed now. I'm glad you told me. I said, no, I'm not the guy. I mean, I don't really know much about horses, despite being from Kentucky. We don't all have 5 horses in the backyard, A lot of people assume.
I know, that's what everybody thinks. Louisville has horses, and everybody has 5 or 6.
Yeah, and so I said, I'm probably not the guy. I'm sure you know guys that could really talk more intelligently about this. He goes, it ain't about the intellectual part of it. It's about how it made you feel and how you articulate that. He's like, you're really good at that. Mm-hmm. And we'll do anything for each other, right? So I said, okay, man, I'll do it. So I flew out. We recorded it, flew back home. And 2 weeks later, I'm sitting in the basement with my wife. We're watching TV. It airs, called Salute to Service. And through that program, Megan Kelly says, Jeremy is a mentor in this program. And I'm like, okay, sometimes we don't get it right. Right. But then she went on to say at the end, and Jeremy's going to do this in his home state of Kentucky. So I hop on the phone, and Patrick, his name's Patrick, he answers. He says, I did not tell her that. And I said, I literally live in a subdivision. I have a 1/4-acre lot. I don't even have a dog. Yeah. Right. Like, how am I going to do this? But my wife grew up around horses. She's shown horses, worked at Churchill Downs, all the things. And she knew friends who had it. And so that's kind of how Veterans Club started. And then after we started doing that, right away, we developed a private Facebook group. And all it was supposed to do was to bring a social group to bring people together. Mm-hmm. And then 2 years later, people are like, Jeremy, you have to become a nonprofit. So many people want to help, and they won't donate if you don't. And I'm like, I don't really want a title. I'm fighting against this title. I just want to be Jeremy. Mm-hmm. And they're like, well, you only need the title for the formality of it. I said, okay, fine. And so that's how it all started. It was exactly how I had never, ever had any experience.
So Megan Kelly she pushed you into it. Megan Kelly pushed you into it.
Essentially. She kind of, yeah. I mean, because I felt like.
And your wife said Megan Kelly's right.
Yeah. I've sent her letters about that, just to let you know that I don't know why you did that, but thank you for doing that, because this is what turned out from it. And so hopefully, she'll respond when she can. But yeah, I mean, that's what's so crazy for people. And I think that's why the government's confused. Everybody's confused. It's like, this guy has no experience. He never worked in a nonprofit. He didn't have any investors. We didn't have $1 for a long time. I remember having $300 in our account. Mm-hmm. But I learned how to be resourceful, and I learned that it's not always throwing money at a problem that fixes a problem. So I started doing these we'd have cookouts. Come over to the house. Bring your kids. And that was just more effective than all these.
Oh, that's what I love about your whole story is, the coffee shop deals, the barbecues, and it's not just the guys showing up, it's their families showing up. Yeah. But you were bringing the whole family out of isolation. And that's what I think is so powerful about what you did. It was just a boots on the ground operation that really touched so many people and grew really quickly. I mean, 2017 is not that long ago.
Right. And, trying to handle, growth is a good thing, but it's still a challenge, right?
Sure.
So trying to handle that and then been looked at nationally as a subject matter expert, right? There's a lot of pressure there. But I just stayed true to what I knew was right. And I would tell my team, they would say, Jeremy, that's a lot. Like when, Senator Rand Paul, he testified about my efforts to the Congress, and they're like, how are you gonna keep the relevance into this? And I said, I don't, that's not my concern. It's just we're gonna keep helping people.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna keep telling people how and how it's effective, and then I don't do it for any kind of relevance. I do it because it's what's needed, and people feel that with me. I believe, I believe they feel the sincerity, the authenticity in who I am, and they know that I'm not. This has never been about an occupation, and that's what I try to let the government know. This is a lifestyle for me, right? Like, it is a calling for me. It's not that I thought. I mean, to be honest, my lawyers have told me, Jeremy, if you would have done this for profit and contracted with the Department of Defense, you'd be a multimillionaire.
Yeah.
And they're like, have you ever thought of that? And I said, never.
Mm-mm.
And they're like, this is why I don't understand what's happening here. Like, you haven't even thought of it.
Tell me, how did it get started? So you get this thing going, you're making all this great impact. There's no debate about that. There is in this whole story, there is no debate about how great the veterans, this whole thing is, and how you've helped, and what you've done, and how people have been at. So that part is off to the side. So when did you find out that somebody was poking around trying to create trouble?
So it was October of 23. I had just come back. I spent 2 weeks at the Emory Brain Center at Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia. I was going through further treatment for PTSD. I have to maintain treatment for my own sanity. And then I was going through their traumatic brain injury clinic as well. I think it was over 41 therapy sessions in those 2 weeks. I stayed in Atlanta. I left on that Friday. And then on Monday, I went into our headquarters, and I was sitting down with our director of operations, who really does all the things they thought I did. I was more of the face,
Right.
More of the story guy.
Right.
So I'm trying to get caught up what I missed for 2 weeks. And there's a knock at the door. 2 guys come in. They have a brewing hat on, backpack. Thought, okay, a couple vets, no problem. And they asked my director, hey, can we speak to Jeremy? And he's like, oh yeah. Because that's just how we are, right?
Mm-hmm.
They come in and they're like, hey, I'm so-and-so. And I'm like, okay, how can I help you? And they're like, hey, we just want to have a conversation. I said, okay, no problem. So we go upstairs to my office and we sit down, and they're asking me these questions. And I'm like, wait a minute. I'm like, guys, this doesn't seem like a conversation to me. This is more like an interrogation. And I need to know who you are.
Mm-hmm.
That's when they finally told me who they were. And they showed their credentials. And I said, okay, well, what are you here for? How can I help you? Basically, because I had no indication that I was under any kind of investigation. They had never talked to me before the indictment, ever. And so
these are just a couple FBI guys that knock on the door.
Yeah, they were VA, OIG, Office Inspector General agents, the criminal division that I didn't even know they had.
Investigative unit.
Yeah, and he was, prior to that, he was a Secret Service guy. But nonetheless, he's like, how do you do this? And I said, well, that's a very broad question. I don't understand what exactly you mean. He's looked around my office. He's like, you have all these awards. He's like, you're running a successful organization. They're talking about you all over the country. But you're supposed to be disabled. You're supposed to be unemployable. Yet you're running this extremely successful organization. And I said, well, I don't have an intellectual disability. That was my first response, right? I said, and I also have a team. I have a board of directors. I don't make any decision in a nonprofit without their approval. That's how nonprofits work. It's not like a for-profit business. I said, but we have a lot of volunteers. There's a lot of hands in this, but I mean, I have the vision, and the vision is to help veterans, and I have the opportunity to do that. And so why would I sit at home and not do anything instead of being productive and helping these veterans quit killing themselves? I said, after all, don't you all do all these campaigns about end veteran suicide? Well, that's exactly what we're trying to do. And I said, in fact, both VA hospitals and their directors in Kentucky have asked me to be a consultant for their executive leadership team. I've done that at no charge to the VA. I've done that strictly voluntarily to try to help them to single-handedly rebuild the trust between veterans and VA. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was a good response to that. Mm-hmm. And then the other guy's like, we're just trying to do our job here. And I'm like, okay, don't know where that come from. I'm answering your questions, but I said, am I in some kind of trouble? That's when I eventually asked that. And he said, yeah, you're indicted for theft of government funds.
Wow.
And the only person I knew that was indicted at that point was Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Like I didn't really know what indictment exactly was. Right. I didn't have no
A
reason
lot of
to.
people get indictment and conviction confused. Indictment is charged.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
in the world out there, a lot of people think indictment is conviction, but a lot of time it's up being that. But yeah.
Well, that's how they treated me.
Yeah.
Right. There was no innocent until proven guilty.
Right.
But I said, well, listen, guys, I'm going to need to get legal guidance here, and so I'm done with this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
He gets up. They get ready to leave my office. The guy turns around. He says, by the way, you've done some amazing things for veterans and their families. He'd been following me for a year. I think he spent 400 hours, something like that, surveilling me.
Yeah.
Which had to be extremely boring. And then you talk about waste, fraud, and abuse.
Yeah.
I mean, he's getting paid to do that. But anyway, he leaves, and I had this summons. They didn't arrest me, which my attorney said that, that they're going to act like they did you a favor, but that would have been really bad had they arrested you for that. So they leave. I go to one of my board of advisors, or my advisor on my advisory board. He happens to be a disability attorney and retired colonel. I go over to his office and I say, is this serious? And he has tears in his eyes, right? And he'd been following us and been a part of our organization from the beginning. And I said, what's going on? He goes, Jeremy, this is very serious. He said, essentially, this is a felony. Like the federal government is trying to convict you of theft. And I'm like, stealing what? Mm-hmm. Like it was their doctors who said I was unemployable. I can't do that for myself.
Right. And I was having this conversation. I wanted to give a shout out to Sabrina Morgan, who connected Jeremy and I. But I was having this conversation with Sabrina this morning, and we were talking back and forth because I was talking about I was going to interview this afternoon, and if anybody could be indicted, it wouldn't be the patient, it would be the doctor. So I'm not saying that doctors did anything wrong, but how could you indict the patient? And if the doctor is the one that gives the diagnosis, and there are multiple doctors in this series of transactions that happened for 13 years, it's beyond understanding of how this got to where it is. I want to take a break here because before I want to get into what your thought process was and how you went forward with your legal team, because you went to trial. I want to get into that. Sure. Before we do, I want to, does anybody think that they don't like the way they look online? It might be some things that people who listen to this show, they might not like what's online. Well, there's help out there. Many individuals think that there's no hope when it comes to managing your reputation online. But there is hope. It's called discoverability.co, and it can help you, whether you're building a reputation from scratch or you're repairing your search results after a negative news story. Discoverability can also help you how you're portrayed on the AI services like ChatGPT. To learn more, visit discoverability.co. And they've even got they're launching a do-it-yourself SEO option, a course for individuals who can take on their search results on their own budget and speed. Listeners of Nightmare Success can get $100 off the DIY SEO course with coupon code Nightmare Success. Check that one out because Drew Chapin, who I know really well, he helps out a lot of people get themselves looking right and feeling good about how they look online. And speaking of the White Collar Support Group, this Nightmare Success podcast is sponsored by the White Collar Support Group, the world's first support group devoted to people navigating the white-collar criminal justice journey. I'm a member of the White Collar Support Group, and I can tell you this is a bunch of people who help each other through the criminal justice journey for free. Whether you're just starting your journey or you made it through to the other side, this is a great space for you. You can join us on Zoom Monday, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. For information, go to prisonist.org. That's prisonist.org. Start here. All right, Jeremy, so you go and you talk, and you've got this attorney that's got tears in his eyes, and he's telling you this is serious. I know how that feels. I mean, I know this whole thing. It gives me PTSD. So what are the next steps that happen for you?
Yeah. So I asked him if he could refer me to an attorney, a criminal defense attorney, in which he did. And I immediately left his office. Of course, I called my wife, one of the hardest calls I ever had to make. I think she spent the first couple minutes on the phone going, what? what? Like she just couldn't
I
believe
think
it.
that's how I
It's just
started
so,
this conversation on Nightmare Success was what? What
yeah,
happened?
yeah,
How did
yeah.
this happen?
It's unfathomable, right? And I immediately thought somebody somewhere, because up to this point, I think a side effect of success is criticism, it's hate,
Sure.
it's envy.
Sure.
Um, and of course, it's a lot of support and a lot of, like, I have a lot more people that love me and support me than don't, but it's the ones that don't that are the
Yeah.
loudest.
It's the quiet people out there.
Yeah. And so as we go through this process, I'm hearing things that people are saying about me, and I'm like, okay, whatever. But never in my wildest dreams did I ever thought that it would somehow end in an indictment, a federal indictment, and so I just thought, man, some group of people somewhere have really worked really hard to try to create a problem for me, and so my first train of thought was problem solving, right? Like has to be a misunderstanding. How do we get through this? But then the other thought I had was, why didn't this investigator talk to me before charging me?
Sure.
Like, I mean, I've watched enough true crime to know that every suspect gets interviewed. Why did he skip that part? And that's when it started to become a little bit weird for me. I'm going, I didn't even have an opportunity to answer his questions, which I could justify all this, but
Right.
maybe that's why he never asked me. So
Well,
anyway,
and I want to make sure that we break it down right too, Jeremy. I
yeah,
know I
yeah,
said a little bit of it at the beginning, but it's very obvious you were an Iraq war veteran. You came
yes.
back. You had somebody tell you you had to go get help. You
Mm,
went and got help, and this is what they said you needed to do as far as, and you then took it through 2 or 3 extra steps to become an expert in the field, so much so that you wanted to help other people and yourself by creating a nonprofit to get people back on their feet. What they said you did wrong is you volunteered too many hours doing too many things, and you can't be disabled if you can do that.
yeah, I mean, essentially that's in a nutshell what they said. And of course, they use legal jumbo to do that. But not only that, I want to also point out for the listeners is that in 2016, the VA said you are permanently and totally disabled with a static condition. And what that means by their definition is not likely to improve. They basically said, go out and live your life. And so Social Security Administration has a Wounded Warrior project or Wounded Warrior program
Mm-hmm.
where if you're rated like that, you can also get benefits from Social Security early. And so I did get those benefits. They knew what I was doing and said that I was not involved in substantial gainful activity and did not prosecute me.
Right. They looked at everything.
Right? Yeah. But I just want the audience to know is that there was no doubt in 2016 that, okay, this is what they said about me. I'll never improve. I had to do something. I'm still a fairly young man, right? So I had to do something. I'm not a guy who just likes to sit around and not do anything. And I thought, why would I go through so much hell and not share with others how to overcome it? I don't want someone else to go through 15 years of hell if I can give them some information that helps them get better. So I thought, well, this is me serving the country still, right? It's
Yeah.
me partnering with VA. Like,
Yeah.
it seems to be all the right things.
Everybody's on the same team.
And then here we are. It's almost as if, and they never bothered me from 16 until 22.
23.
Yeah, 20. Well, they started the investigation in 22, right?
You just didn't know it.
Yeah. They said that the agent said that he got an anonymous tip that started this investigation, but I have a timeline because the VA captures everything, and I have a timeline that anonymous tip come in December, but I was being examined and investigated in September of 2022. So it wasn't that. They were already investigating me, but it's almost as if they needed a good reason.
Yeah.
So they got an anonymous tip who then said on the anonymous tip, it pretty much said that we believe Jeremy is living too good to be disabled, and we worry that he's taking money from the organization.
Right.
So
And that's another thing that's
Yeah.
not the case.
Not at all.
This is a case only about disability.
Yeah.
Could we have a different type of discussion if, Jeremy had millions of dollars of this nonprofit and he was taking millions of dollars out? That is not even part of this case. That's not That's not even discussion. It's
Yeah.
about $100,000 over 13 years of disability.
Yeah. And so, the agent had a forensic accountant go through my records, realized because he told me in the interview with me that he knows that I've never taken a dollar from the organization. And so I'm like, okay, well, what are we doing here? Well, so that took care of the money part of it, but then why didn't they close the investigation? Why did they continue to find a way to try to come after me? That's the $1 million question.
It is $1 million question. So you decide, for the people who listen to this show, they know the statistics because I say them like it's a broken record, but
Yeah.
97, 98% of the people that get indicted plea. Jeremy didn't do that. Jeremy believed that no matter what, this was so crazy and so wrong and that he was going to go to trial. Lead us through that trial. What was, how does that work?
Yeah. So, the first day of trial obviously is jury selection, which is a really encompassing process that it just blew my mind. The whole thing's mind blowing. It's very anxiety.
It's like you're watching another thing that it's not your life.
Yeah, it's almost like an out of body experience, right? I'm like, how am I even sitting in here for helping? I just couldn't get that out of my head, right? And so we're trying to decide, who we're going to pick for jury. Of course, we get our picks, they get their picks, but anybody that was a veteran essentially got cut. Anybody that was on disability essentially got cut. Anybody that had PTSD or known somebody had PTSD got cut. And I'm going, okay.
All the people that could identify.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, so they're not going to understand anything from my perspective. And it's hard for anybody to anyway. Here's why, is the VA claim process is so complex. The Indiana Bar Association just put it out in their magazine saying that it's so complex. Veterans don't even really know how to do it. And the people that work there often don't know how to do it. And we had a guy that worked there, and his whole job was to do claims at the VA. He's been there since 2009, and he admitted that they often make mistakes. So now you got this jury pool. Many of them are 19, 22, 23 years old. And maybe they drive a truck or they're a pharmacy tech or something like that. How is that my peers? So I go, how are they peers to me? Mm-hmm. Like, they're not going to understand disability or VA. None of them are veterans. And they're definitely not going to understand what it's like to lead a nonprofit and mental health. And so anyway, I knew that I was in a bad situation right away when I seen the jury and realized and I was just like, my only hope is that my lawyers can, because I thought this should be very easy to explain. Mm-hmm. And we still believe today, I just met with my attorneys yesterday on Veterans Day, which was weird, but nonetheless, there was a truckload of reasonable doubt in that courtroom. But prosecutors are really good. They're like robots. I just remember this guy going, it's as if he does this every day, right? Whereas my attorneys, one of my attorneys he tried 76 cases in his career, which I think is a lot. Mm-hmm. But most attorneys may not ever even go into a courtroom, to be honest. And so, yeah, especially, and here's the other thing the listeners need to know is there's not another case like mine. We could find no case law. So now
I've never heard of a case like yours, Jeremy, ever.
Right. So there's nothing to compare it to. So they're going in as attorneys, but they're not miracle workers, right? They're trying to figure out how do we prove this case. But the prosecutor kept trying to convince the jury that I was not truthful during my examinations. And he even used documents from Social Security to try to convict me when Social Security didn't even try to convict me, right? And so what really happened was, these folks in the jury box are going, they keep saying he didn't tell the truth. He didn't tell the truth. My lawyer's like, believe me, if they believe Jeremy didn't tell the truth, he would have a charge for false statements. Right. They're not in the mercy business here, right?
Right. That's what Martha Stewart went to prison for, lying to the FBI.
But then all 13 or so witnesses that was for the prosecution, none of them said I was a liar. None of them said I was without integrity. In fact, these witnesses, they made claims in their statement to the agent, and they never even said that on the stand. They said things like, Jeremy's a noble man. Jeremy's one of the best leaders I've ever served with. He would do anything for people, not just vets, but anybody. I had the VA, the chief experience officer, get up there and said he single-handedly rebuilt trust in the veteran community and got more people to come and be a part of our programs at the VA. And my lawyers whispered to me, it's like, this is like a damn award ceremony for you. This is going to help you. Despite all that, and then right after they all testified, and I don't know why the prosecutor did this. I really thought it was going to work against him. He played about an hour's worth of all my clips in the media and just different interviews I did where I would say, this is why I do it. I don't do it for gain. I do it because I go through it, all this, everything.
Right.
So I'm going, okay, great. I don't have to testify now because now the judge knows me, the jury knows me, and I don't have to worry about getting crossed and that kind of thing. But with all that said, the agent gets up there. He admits, one of the first questions my lawyer asked is, would Mr. Harrell have ever received anything from the VA that said he could not or have a limitation on volunteering? Agent says no. That right there is enough.
That should
and
be
so
it.
he goes, so is there anything in VA policy about volunteering at all? He said no. He said, what about starting a nonprofit? He said no. He said, so there's really no rule against it? No. Case closed. But it didn't work.
Close, hit the gavel.
Right. And
dismissed.
So when and then we had that form from the Social Security Administration, who it's much harder to get disability through because they're an all or nothing agency. They don't have percentages like the VA. We bring this form up to the guy who makes the decision at the VA, and we say, have you seen this form? He says no. And they're like, so you get all the other Social Security documentation to help make your case, but you never seen this one where it says, we looked at Jeremy, made a special determination, and even though he's the founder and CEO of Veterans Club, we don't believe he's doing anything wrong. You just so happen not to get that one in your package. And he says, I've never seen that. The prosecutor is sweating through his suit at that point, trying his best to get that not put into evidence. They're fighting at the bench, and it gets put into evidence, and I thought, okay, that's the deal.
That's good.
We're good.
Right.
And man, it just didn't work out that way. And I don't know why, but he kept trying to convince in the closing statements the jury that Mr. Harrell lied. Mr. Harrell could have made $250,000 a year. He was very successful. Look what he's able to accomplish. Nobody in the jury box, unfortunately, will probably ever make $250,000 a year. And so they're going, man, he could make all that money, and he's getting disability, not knowing the intricacies of that. And so my lawyer's like, did anybody see a $250,000 check for Jeremy? Because we haven't seen a $250,000. We're assuming, like, all that aside, they get the last word, the prosecution, and he just kept on with the false statements. With Jeremy's, they used a 2020 questionnaire from the Social Security Administration where I said that I wasn't doing a lot of the things that I have been doing since, but never pointed out the fact that was 2020. It was the year of COVID. Nobody was doing anything. Yeah. But they didn't use the evaluation I did in 24 and 23, where I said, we work with vets, run a nonprofit. Yeah. And then the agent gets up there and he says, if Mr. Harrell would have just told the examiner at the VA that he was the founder and CEO of Veterans Club, we wouldn't be here today. And
it doesn't even make any sense.
I thought, that's a hell of a claim. Like, she didn't ask me if I was. And most of the people at the VA know who I am anyway, because I partner with them every day.
Yeah.
So I'm like, how can I be here because someone didn't ask me?
And it's public.
Yeah.
It's public. It's not hidden. I wonder, after going through all that, hearing all that, when the jury walked back in, you see this all the time on TV. What was going through your mind?
Well, they only deliberated for like an hour and 40 minutes. It was a Friday evening.
Okay.
They've been there all week. I didn't want to do it on a Friday. I wanted to try to push it into next week because it's Friday night, right?
All right. So they want to get it over with.
Exactly. They're getting texts. We're supposed to be at Uncle Bobby's, whatever. Yeah. But when they walked back in, I thought, okay, we're going to finish this. This is done, right? And then I thought about advocacy after. I was already had my plan on what I was going to do next. And the judge, or not the judge, but his clerk read off, Mr. Harrell guilty on one count of theft of government funds. And I heard my wife gasp so loud, man, that I had nightmares about that for a couple of days. I'll never forget it. And then we had the courtroom full all week. It was so bad, I think the marshals were getting frustrated because there's people in the hallways, but they all were like, you
It
just
was a
hear the
big
grumbling.
story. I mean, if anybody looks it up, I mean, it's a big story because I think a lot of people are really confused about it.
Yeah, yeah. And so I felt like personally my legs were going to fall out under me. I thought, how in this country did I just get convicted of a felony for helping people? That was my first thought.
Yeah.
And then my attorneys, they had told me at the beginning of trial, if you get convicted, you'll probably go to jail that day, and especially in the district that I was in. So when he said that, I started to take my watch off, right? And my lawyer's like, now we have to try to keep you out.
Mm-hmm.
So he says, Judge, I would ask that my client remain out on bond pending sentencing. And the judge smiled and said, one thing that we've learned here this week is that Mr. Harrell is not a danger to his community. And he said, so I will allow Mr. Harrell, but they didn't give me an ankle monitor. I had no further restrictions. And the only thing the prosecutor said was, my only ask is that he does not return back to Veterans Club until further notice. Mm. And so the judge was kind of like, well, what's further notice? You know, you can't really do that. And the prosecutor was like, he was like, they couldn't understand what was happening. He's like, well, I'm just going to need a couple of days to figure it out. Ultimately, he didn't get his wish, but I left that day and still haven't heard from anybody from the court. But I just remember walking out and going, I'm a convicted felon. and I've literally, I didn't know what to tell the people that were there. Everybody was shocked. Mm-hmm. But then I thought, well, wait a minute. Everybody expected a not guilty. But if somehow something happens later on that brings more awareness to this situation, that may be a whole purpose behind this.
Could be. Right.
So I started to switch my mindset to, okay, I just got hit in the face, right? Because that's what it felt like. Now I got to fight back, right? And of course, my wife, I was trying to console her. And I didn't realize how lucky I was to be able to walk out of the courtroom because the guilty verdict was just in my head. And my attorney was like, Jeremy, you have goodwill with this judge. Like the fact that you're leaving. And I was like, what do you mean? Like I should have been able to leave. Like, why is this a surprise? I was, obviously emotional at that point. But yeah, so after that happened, it was real quiet. Of course the news reported they killed me in the media. Yeah. And I couldn't tell my side of the story, which has been, as an advocate, it's tough. It's the hardest thing in the world when you can advocate for thousands of people, but you can't advocate for yourself, right? Yeah. So I'm seeing all these reports, and I mean, it's on Reddit, it's everywhere, man. And I'm going, man, I have no privacy in my life, and I'm going, and I can't defend myself. I have news reporters from all over calling saying, Jeremy, we want to hear your side. Mm-hmm. We want to hear your side. It's so tempting, right? To get on there and tell my side, but my lawyer's like, hey, let's just not do that right now. And that's probably been the biggest argument between me and my attorneys really is, when can I stand up for myself, right? Because
it's tough.
Yes, you're an attorney. Yes, you guys did a good job, but it's my life at the end of the day. You're going to go to your next case. Yeah. I may go to prison. I'm going to be out a ton of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars. All this kind of stuff was going through my head.
What do you think your sentencing is it the 8th, December 8th?
December 9th.
December 9th. So what are the guideline parameters of what we think the judge is looking at?
Well, so it appears that I should have been a level 14. I just got my PSR back. And something happened. They added money. I don't know how they did that. We're going to argue that.
They always figure that out. Yeah.
But that put me up to
just to make it harder for the judge. Yeah.
Yeah. So that put me up to like a level 16, which I think carries 15 to 21 months. Obviously we're going to try to get a non-custodial, hopefully probation. It's very difficult to do. That's a heck of a downward departure, but there's some good conduct factors in there.
Yeah. You've got an unbelievable goodwill. You've served the country. You fought in an incredible war, came back and I might be wrong about this, but I thought I remembered one of our conversations that you went down to North Carolina to help people out with the hurricane relief. Is that part of my memory?
Well, you're close. It was supposed to be North Carolina, but it was actually Florida.
Okay.
And before I get into that, I want the audience to know that during the trial, the judge did make a motion on this Rule 29, which they usually deny. It's really just so the defendant gets an appeal upon conviction. And he held on to that ruling until October 8th. So from August 23rd to October 8th, he held on, wasn't sure how he was going to do that. He could have easily, acquitted me of all charges. So we're trying to figure that out. But yes, I went down to do, so one of the things, I'm a chaplain with an organization that does disaster relief, and they kept emailing me because of Hurricane Helene and Hurricane Milton. I originally wanted to go to North Carolina just because it's closer geographically to Kentucky, but they had enough people there. They asked me to go down to Southwest Florida for Milton relief, and I called my attorney. I said, "Hey, do you think I can go do this?" He said, "Probably not." He said, "But you can ask. All I can say is no." And I said, "Well, who's my probation officer?" He said, "Well, I don't know who your probation officer is." I said, "I don't either. Nobody's contacted me since I left court." And I said, "Well, I'll call the guy who was my pretrial PO, right?" So I called him. He's like, "Yeah, I still am, but I'm not too worried about you." I said, "Well, here's the deal. I'd like to go do this if possible." And he said, "Well, I'll send an email to the prosecutor." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's probably not going to work." 2 hours later, I get a text message that says the AUSA approved your travel. And I said, "Well, that's too vague. I need more details before I get caught up in something." So I call him. I said, "I appreciate that, but is there any reporting requirements?" I said, "Because since I talked to you, it's now Florida, not North Carolina." He said, "No, we don't need that." And I said, okay. Just want to be clear on that. And so I realized that this is a 15-hour drive. So I called back and said, "Hey, I found a flight that would be cheaper than gas for me to fly right in the airport 7 miles from the location I'm going. Can I do that?" And he goes, "Yeah." Like, why wouldn't you fly? He's like, I don't drive anything past 8 hours anymore. And I'm like, "Well, I just didn't know, man. Like, I don't know if I don't want to get caught up by TSA. I don't know if there's any flags on me or anything like that." And he's like, "No, you can fly. You should fly." So I did, and I went through TSA. Fun fact is it was the Department of Homeland Security that helped this investigator investigate me. But my TSA pre-check was clear. I went through TSA pre-check, no issues. Went down there, spent 7 days ministering to people who lost everything in the floods. Not floods, but hurricanes that led into floods. Did that, come back, and just come back and said, "Hey, I just want to
The
go
reason I brought it up, Jeremy, is I think it
Yeah.
says a lot to your character that you got
Yep.
convicted in a crazy courtroom deal, and you went in the midst of that to go back out to help people who were hurting down in Florida. And I think it just says a lot about who you are and where you are and what you think, even when you've been hit upside the head. You know, I know you haven't gone to prison, but you have gone through one hell of a nightmare
Mm.
to this point. Um, what do you think's your biggest takeaway through all this that you've gone through?
Well, it kind of goes back to what the comment you just mentioned, the fact that I still had the desire to go help people. And one of the things that I'm taking away from this is they can do a lot to me, but they can't take my heart, they can't take my faith, and they can't take my brain.
That's right.
And the biggest loss in all this would be if they had so much power over me that it made me quit doing what I know is right to do for others.
Mm-hmm.
And so I vow not to do that. I vow to continue serving others, continue doing what God would want me to do, and just know that everybody that has a big impact and big story in the Bible, they all went to prison.
Yep.
I mean, that is a true story. In
The
fact,
Bible's a book of prisons.
Yeah, I seen a shirt the other day that said all my heroes have been in prison. It's got Paul and Peter
exactly.
and John, and I know we laugh about it, but the truth is, it's like anybody who's ever stood for something, there's been cost associated with that, and it's just been created an opportunity for me to teach my kids that, listen, when you really stand up for what's right, it's not always well received, even though it's right, and in fact, it could become threatening to others, and so do it anyway.
Yeah.
Right. And so I'm going to continue. I'm even more fired up to do what I've always done. I'm going to continue to do that because that's one thing that nobody can take from me. And I haven't been arrested yet at all. Although I'm a convicted felon, which I think is just almost laughable. I've never been processed or any of that. But in the event that on December 9th, things don't go my way and I end up on my way to a federal prison somewhere, um, my thought now is wherever I go, I want to be an asset to the other guys in there.
And you
I
will
want to be able
be.
to share something with them that they can leave and be successful. And the funny thing is, through my organization, one of the things we do is prison ministry.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been in a lot of prisons. In fact, we have a really good partnership with the biggest jail in Kentucky here, where we go in and we deal with incarcerated veterans.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm pretty good in that environment, which scares me. And God will do strange things. But anyway, wherever I go is I'll just try to be an asset and try to be helpful for the men around me.
And Jeremy, you will be, because of who you are and how you've lived your life. I've always said that anybody that goes into prison, they'll get along in prison how they got along on the outside.
That's good.
And if you can get along with people and you can work with people and people like you and you give and all that, that's how it works on the inside. It's just a little bit more primitive because it's it's different. But if you're a disturber and don't get along with people, you won't get along with people in prison. But if it does happen to you, which I'm hoping that you get probation, you will be a leader there too, because you're a leader. And I mean, I think I've been inspired by you and your story and what you've done, and I think it's absolutely awful what's happened. We need people like you out here doing what you're doing, helping veterans. To take you out of that game
Right.
and pull you aside is just absolutely flabbergasting to me. But I do know that we live in a crazy world, and no matter what, you're a survivor and you'll step through it. And I mean, you got a true nightmare success story. And I really appreciate you, Jeremy, coming on and sharing it. And if people want to get a hold of you at the Veterans Club, it's veteranclubs.org.
It's Veterans Club Inc.
Veterans Club
.org.
Inc.
Veterans
I
Club
hope everybody checks that out, because it's a cool site. You've got a great board of people on there. It goes into all the different things that you guys have done. I still don't know if I've seen that tiny homeless thing anywhere else. I don't think I have. If I have, I'm not aware of it. I just think everything that you've done, Jeremy, you've used all your experiences of everything that you've gone through, because you could have taken a left turn when you were a kid and ended up in a really bad, horrible situation. And you took that, you fought for our country, you got back, you had your own issues, and you took your issues, became an expert on it, and started helping people and helping the community and making it thrive. And I think it's a shame what's happened, but I also know that you're going to survive and work through it and be stronger. Even you're one strong son of a bitch, but you're going to be strong anyway.
I will tell you before we end, I will tell you that, I see why people don't go to trial. Sitting through 5 days of that was probably one of the most highest forms of torture I've ever experienced. And I've been through a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Just to have people determine what you think and what you do and why you do what you do is very, very difficult. But, my pastor, we sit down often. He says, I said, I don't understand why this would happen to me. He says, as much as I don't want to, I can. He goes, why wouldn't God use you to give you even more of a story, to give you even bigger of a platform to go out and make change?
Yep.
Why wouldn't he use somebody who's done it instead of, and he knows you got the strength for it. And I'm like, I could think of other things to do, but nonetheless, I got to stay positive. I know that this is just a bump in the road. I told my attorney when they offered me a plea, I told my attorney to tell the prosecutor that I've wore uniforms and I've ate bad food for a long time in my life. Mm-hmm. That's not my main concern. I will stand for my integrity and who I am and my character as a man. I will not accept responsibility for something that I did not do. And so here we are.
Here we are. And I wish you the best of luck, Jeremy. When this goes out, there will already be a decision on where you are. And maybe you get probation if the judge does the right thing with this situation, because it should have never have been where it is. But again, I so appreciate you. I appreciate what you've done.
Thank you.
For the veterans and fighting for the country and being who you are. Talking about gratitude, I want to give a shout out to Homestead Financial, Home Mortgage. And if you got home mortgage needs, Greg Aftiev is your guy. They let me use this room here with all the fancy stuff that I barely know how to operate. If you need a book out there, I wrote one. It's Nightmare Success. You can get it on Barnes & Noble and Amazon. Please check it out. And if you got time, I know it's a hassle, but if you leave a review on Apple, it really helps the show. to grow. If you want to know what I'm doing, check me out on brentcassity.com. I spell it wrong. It's with a TY, not a DY. Would have loved to have been the Sean and Davids, but I'm just the TY guy. And as I used to say when I was writing my emails back and forth from Leavenworth, stay strong. I'll do the same. Jeremy Harrell, you are a true warrior, and I appreciate you, man.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you having me on. I enjoyed it.
Nightmare success in and out.